Hey guys, today I'm making the Seductress by Seems Legit, and in honor of Thor Love Thunder coming out, I have made a Thor themed bag. So if you'd like to see how I make this, just check out the rest of my tutorial. Hey guys, I'm going to be making a Seductress Clutch by Seems Legit. We are in honor of Thor Love and Thunder, making it Thor themed. We're going to turn it into his armor. So what you need is, for the basic design, is going to be the front. This is actually split in two, as if it were directional fabric, because it will be a fold over bag. I have the insides and the back. I have card slots, an ID slot, and various pocket pieces, along with ends for our zipper, because we are going to have some zipper ends on there. So, what do you say we get started, yeah? Okay, so the Seductress actually calls for a piece for the inside, the front and back to be one big piece like this. But because I am doing something a little bit different with it, I've actually cut the pieces down and added a little bit of seam allowance so that you have two halves. What I'm doing is I am going to make this piece right here look like Thor's armor. Now I am basing it off of armor from the Dark World. And you'll see what it looks like as we get going. So what I'm going to do first, before I sew on this piece here, is just add the little corner cape pieces, and then I'll get the rest of the front done once I have these two pieces attached. Okay, so we're going to be attaching two little corner pieces that look like this, and that's going to be the cape carrying to the back. Once I have those on, we're going to be adding on the silver fronts to the armor. So it'll look something along the lines of this. Get this all together. Once we are done, I am going to sew these on and then attach the back, just so that the pieces are already taken care of and I don't have to use the red thread for longer than needed. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll line this up. Put our foot down and get started. Because this piece is going to be in the seam allowance, I'm not adding any back stitching at the moment because it will be sewn over. Let's go ahead and turn, sew down. Now I don't technically have to do this as long as the front pieces that are going to be showing are done, but it'll help anchor it down and make it one piece so that I'm not flopping them around or missing them as I sew. More. Turn again, and up we go. And one back, and let's get the other one on. Go ahead and make sure that you cut off the threads so that they don't get caught and show up in the rest of the work. Let's go ahead and get this second piece on. I'm going to go ahead and clip it just to hold it in place while I sew. And we'll go ahead and just start right here. Pull the thread back. And off we go. Now, since the decoration isn't part of the pattern, what I'm doing is just using 1/8 of an inch for the top stitching for these pieces. It's enough to hold it down, so. And one last one. Back stitch, and we're going to go ahead and attach the back half as we sew. Again, making sure we keep everything lined up. This one I am going to back stitch on because it is the two pieces coming together, and we are going to just sew straight across. Make sure that you do sew at a pace that's comfortable for you. Now that I'm at the other end, back stitch and cut the thread. What I'm going to be doing here is folding this over to catch the seam allowance, and I'm going to go ahead and top stitch down to hold that in place. On my top stitching, I generally do it about a 3.5 millimeter stitch. Generally works pretty well for me. Give it a little push there sometimes. Sometimes it needs a little bit of a running start. And then just make sure that your seam allowance is staying over the direction that you need it to go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and change the thread, and then we'll get the silver pieces down. Alright, so for this, I'm actually using, instead of a 1/8 top stitch, at least on these little pieces, I'm going into about maybe a 1/16, and that's just because these are a little thin, and I don't want a straight line of stitching right down the middle. So we're going to go ahead and stitch on these pieces, starting with an armor piece. We're going to hold this down as best we can as we go. I'm going to go a little slow to make sure that I don't mess up. One more stitch, turn it, and since it's a little wider, I'm going to go ahead and go with the 1/8 of an inch. One more, there we go. Now I do have this taped down so that it holds while I'm sewing. Looks like it's trying to stretch a little bit, but the tape should help with that. One more. It should be right under the point. Yep. Okay. And up we go. And one more. There we go. Turn. And this should do it for here. Maybe one more stitch. It's right on the edge there. I'm going to go ahead and move it in here since that'll be in the seam allowance. We're coming into a tight little curve. We're going to go ahead and move this one at a time. As we go around the curve. One more. There we go. All right. Next, I just have to sew around this detail, and then we'll be putting the big circles on. Start right there. And come back around. And back one. Lock everything in. And we're going to repeat on this other hole. Go ahead and get these threads cut. That way they're out of our way. And turn. And one stitch back. Alright, cut the thread and onto the circles. Well, this one I'm gonna go ahead and tape down because I don't want it to move while I am trying to sew, and it doesn't have to be a huge piece, just right in the middle, just to tack it down over what I already have done. Again, to hold it in place so that it doesn't move while I'm trying to sew. I can get the backing off. There we go. There's one. Number 2. There we go. This one looks like it might be able to be up a little bit higher, so I'm gonna place that just a little bit higher up there. Be roughly equal. Perfect. Let's go ahead and get this sewn on. Now, since it is going in a curve, you want to be real slow and adjust as necessary so that you can keep the stitches moving in the correct direction. If it gets to a point where you need to readjust, just go ahead and pause, lift the foot a little bit, and keep going. Decorations like this, I know it's not in the pattern, it's just something you want to be careful with and make sure that you are not going too fast so that you don't miss where you're supposed to be sewing. We're almost back around to where we started. Let's do one more. Come back. Thread, and I'll go ahead and do the other side. just. All right, armor is done. One of the goals that we have is to make sure that we start with as many pieces and reduce them down to as few pieces as possible. So what I'm doing right now is an ID window that's going to go on the fold over section of the clutch that we're working on. I already have the plastic pinned down. I'm actually going to be feeding it this way with the plastic on top through my sewing machine, because my sewing machine works a little bit better with that clear plastic this way. So we're going to go ahead and get that stitched around and then stitched onto the piece that it goes onto. And make sure that everything is sitting where it needs to. Get it lined up, and let's get going. I've found on my machine that if I feed it with the clear plastic down, the clear plastic does not want to move anywhere. So this works best. One more stitch. There we go. All right, across here. I'll take the next clip off. One more. And we're going to take this clip off and turn, again lifting the foot up slightly so we can rotate everything around. Oop. Hands are a little clumsy. Drive this straight home and back stitch to lock it in. Alright, let's go ahead and get these puppies trimmed. Now what I am going to do on the top here is put one row of top stitching, because that way it'll at least match the design on the rest of it as we're going. Alright. Remember, go ahead and trim off any excesses so it doesn't get in the way. This big long one here. All right, so this is going on to our big piece of vinyl. This is going to be folded like this. So it's going to go in the middle of this top section. So what I'm going to go ahead and do to make it a little bit easier to find is just put a little snip there and a little snip right here at the bottom. There we go. And that way I can find the center. And we're going to go ahead and sew down our ID window. Back stitch, it locks it in. Alright, and we have our ID window in place. Now you can slide your ID through here and it'll be held on. Okay, so this piece here is going to be at the bottom of the card slots. What I'm doing is I am facing it right side to right side, and I have it clipped across the top. So what we're going to be doing is just sewing along this, and then we're going to be tacking down the seam allowance. So let's go ahead and get started. I have my stitching lined up. Make sure that you back stitch to hold all those stitches in place. Get rid of that guy. Off. Take some thread out of there. And we're almost there to the end. Cut that. We're going to be folding down and top stitching like that. Make sure that you back stitch again, keeping all the pieces where you need to go. Make sure that you have everything folded in the correct direction so that it's not getting stuck elsewhere as we go across. Alright. Now we have our card slots. On this with the halfway point, I'm going to actually be sewing on either side of that line so that we create the card slots going up. And again on the other side. So this is what you should have by now. So what I'm going to be doing next is actually attaching on the snap that's going to hold it closed before we add any other sewing to it. That way the snap is taking place before we sew it down, because it will get very difficult to attach this the way that it needs to be attached if I don't do it right now. So we'll be right back and I'll get the magnetic snap on. So I had to add a snap down here. It's what you use to keep it shut. What I did was use the directions to mark up where it needed to go right between those two lines, and then press the top part of the internal snap in. Now we still have to put the other side in so that when it shuts it will snap shut, but for now we have that bottom half in. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. We are going to be taking one of our Thor pieces here, one of our marble pieces, and we are going to be facing it this way and then sewing across and flipping and then top stitching. So these two pieces are going to be joined together. So let's go ahead and get that started here. Right up at the top. Now if you feel like you need to clip this together, you absolutely can. Otherwise you can just hold it together and sew down the side. Whatever works best for you. The foot pedal would help. There we go. We're going to be flipping this. My finger press it a little bit so it stabilizes, and then I'm going to press this, and we're going to top stitch along this top mark just like we did over the tops of the card slots. Go ahead and get that measured in where it needs to be. And let's get started. Go ahead and fix this a little bit. So what we're going to be doing next is fitting in a zipper pocket that's going to be going directly behind this, and then we'll be attaching it onto our backing piece. So it's going to go right down here. So when this folds over, it's going to catch the snap here, and then when you open it, you'll have your card slot, and then you'll have your ID slot, and then your card slots down here. So we're going to go ahead and start working on the pocket that will attach to the back of this next. Alright, so we are going to be sewing in the zipper pocket. We're going to be using zipper ends on this. I went ahead and attached them. I am holding them on at the ends with some double-sided tape, so if you do have that, it is your friend. Now you do notice that I did use a rainbow zip because, you know, Thor travels around via the rainbow bridge, and we are going to attach this on. I thought it would be a nice touch. Alright, here we go. And again, I'm going to be using contrasting thread because I think it'll look kind of nice as it goes through. Alright. So side number 1. Cut off your extra threads, again, so they don't get in your way, and we'll go ahead and attach side number 2. Make sure that we get that locked in there. Back up. Alright. So what we're going to do after we get this cut down a little bit here is find the center, which is going to be right here. We're going to be using that center mark to line up the fabric. So we have our outside pieces, which are the Avengers, and our inside pieces, which are going to be solid red. So on this one, what we're going to do is just make a couple little small snips here. And then this is just, again, to line up the fabric so that we can get it directly center. So we're going to line up this clip as the center point. The wrong side to right side on this. Go ahead and pin everything in place here. And then we are going to line up the Avengers fabric. Now, one thing that you do want to pay attention to is which way you want this to zip. So when you're putting it in at the end, you want to make sure that you have it in the direction if you want it to open to the right or if you want to open it to the left. So just be aware of that when you're attaching it once we have this piece done. Alright. Now, 1/4 inch seam on all zippers. So we're going to be lining it up. And you'll feel the zipper up against the foot as we go. Let me go ahead and move this out of the way a little bit. Alright. Go ahead and get started here. When you come up to the zipper head as you're sewing, you just want to make sure that you pause, lift the foot on your sewing machine, and move that zipper out of the way so it's not going to interfere while you're sewing the rest of the pocket together. Now, this part of the foot here is lined up next to the zipper, so I can keep it lined up where it needs to be. Alright, and just like before, what we're going to be doing is changing the position of the foot, and we are going to be top stitching just the outer with the Avengers fabric on here. Again, all of my top stitching is done at 1/8 of an inch, and I need to rethread this, so give me 1 second here. My thread's getting torn up just a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and top stitch. Again, I use 1/4 of an inch when I top stitch. You want to make sure that you have the correct distance, and we're going to go ahead and go on across. So just make sure that you're pulling the fabric apart. I'm going to go ahead and lift this foot up here real quick because I'm dragging my zipper. That way you don't have any weird folds along that seam line that you're top stitching down. The end here. Back up. Side one. Now I just need to repeat with the second side, and remember, go ahead and trim out those threads as needed. So again, we're going to be lining up the fabric with the red going down first, facing the back of the zipper. I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned in place here. And lay down the fabric over the top. And I'm changing the position of my foot so that I can get the 1/4 inch needed for zippers. Time it's being a little bit difficult because it's a little thicker. Remember, again, as you get close to where the zipper head is, which is right here, you want to pause, lift your foot up, and get that zipper head moved so it's out of your way. Once it's out of your way, you can drop your foot and then continue across. We're going to do the same thing as we did before. Fold this over and add our top stitching in. Zipper's in the way. It's a little bit big for that. Now this is going to be pinched down like this. I'm going to go ahead and very quickly sew this up a little bit to help hold it in place. So I'm just going to be doing a little bit of stitching to hold this in place before we attach it to anything else. It's going to get a little more difficult as you get up to where the foot is, but you want to make sure that everything is even. Let me go ahead and hold this a little bit here. I'm going to do it to the other side as well. Again, that's just to hold everything in place so that it doesn't move when you're trying to attach everything together. So we're going to get all these gathered up and underneath the machine. I'm doing it within the seam allowance. That way these stitches won't show once you're sewing together the final product. The pocket's going to sit here and it's going to go just behind the rest of this. So this now is all going to be tacked down to this piece here. And again, you want to make sure that everything is being treated as one piece. So we're going to go ahead and this is going to get real thick at the end, but it's doable. Just be aware of that with your machine because it does get a little bit thick. So we're going to go ahead and tack up the sides here. One thing that I didn't do when it was just to help with the thickness is the very edges of the pieces, when I interfaced them, I left them blank. That way it wouldn't be quite as thick once we are sewing this part. So it does help with the thickness here, especially since we have those card slots. So it really does assist with that. This part's going to be a little bit different because we're starting on the higher end here. And again, this is just for the purposes of holding everything together so that it acts like one piece. And unfortunately for me, my zipper is getting in the way up here. There we go. Sometimes things just need a little bit of an assist. Alright, so we have our card slots here. We have a pocket and the zipper pocket and another space as well. So you'll have plenty of stuff, spots for your stuff, whether you are carrying receipts or if you want to put your phone in one of the flaps. I've done that before. It works out really well. So we're going to very quickly put the other half of the snap on here, and then we're down to our final construction. Okay, so we are going to be adding a little zipper pocket to the back side here. I'm going to be creating a little box that we're going to be sewing around and cutting so that we can add in that zipper. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. What you want to do is measure about 1/2 inch down just to make room for the zipper. And you're going to measure in at about 3/4 of an inch from each end. I know it's a little dark here, but we'll be able to see the line as we continue across. So we have line number 1. We're going to make line number 2. Make sure I have that lined up properly. In the same spot. Over. Alright, so we're going to center this onto our panel here. And the best way that we can do that is if we fold this in half and we make a little snip, and then we make a little snip here at the bottom. Like that. And again, what that's going to do is allow us to make sure that we are measuring it from the center up to where we want the pocket to be. So this is lined up. Unfortunately, I can't hold this in place anywhere, so I'm just going to have to keep a pretty good grip on it. So we're going to go ahead and get this set up so that we can get the, I'm going to put it right there, pocket in place. We're going to go ahead and lower down our foot. This line is really hard to see, so back stitch. I'm only going down the 2 lines on the side. I am not going to be sewing on the ends here. And the reason for that is because I find that it makes it easier to cut once we have to go back the other way. We're going to go ahead and line that up. Okay. So we have our little box here. Remember, cut off all threads as needed. We're going to fold this in half. And we're going to cut here. Once we have it started, just open this up. We're going to cut this in half until we get about 1/2 inch from the end. And you can go a little farther out than 1/2 inch, but about 1/2 inch from the end. And set up a little triangle here at the corners. That'll help box the corner out once we get to the end there. And cut this, and then from there we're going to go ahead and angle it. And angle it. There we go. Now this part is a little bit trickier because it is vinyl, and if you noticed, I did not interface my pockets because I'm just trying to reduce down weight a little bit. So we're going to flip this inside out. And the pocket will be on the inside. Now, if you need to, you can use double-sided tape to hold down the vinyl because you're going to be fighting against it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll continue on in just a minute. I'm going to be sewing around the zipper now that we have it in place. What you'll notice is I have the zipper about halfway down. My foot is just past it. One of the things that I'm looking to do as I go around is just make sure that the zipper is out of my way. I'm going to go ahead and pull on this just a little bit to eliminate that as much as possible on this side. Turn. So the zipper is out of my way as I sew around. Once again. So you'll notice as I get to about where the zipper is, again I'm going to pause and lift the foot to get the zipper head out of my way. What that allows me to do is keep the zipper straight as I continue to sew down. And so just, tug on it as necessary. It's a little hard when it's vinyl and cloth. One more, there we go. I'll move this out of my way. We're going to be on the home stretch here in just a second. Again, let me make sure I have everything moved as best as it's going to be. Cross over the line. One more. There we go. Back up. And zipper is in. So make sure that you cut the threads again as needed. Now what we're going to be doing is on the back side we are going to take our second piece here. We are going to be laying it down, and we are going to be sewing around the sides. That way we get, I'm going to start over here on this side, we get the pocket closed as well. We're going to go ahead and just put the zipper in the middle so it's out of the way. We're going to be lining this up. I should probably have this clipped. This is a little difficult, so give me 1 second. Let me get this clipped, and then we'll go ahead and start sewing. Alright, so we are going to be sewing around the pocket to sew it shut. Let me go ahead and back up. And remember, this part can get a little tricky when you're doing it. So we're going to go ahead and just continue around. Make sure that you fold the bag out of the way as you go. I'm only going to about 1/4 or 1/8 closed on the seam for the pocket, just to kind of give it as much space as possible. So I'm going to go ahead down along the ends here. move the clip out of the way, lift my foot so I can turn and continue up this way. I'm going to be, again, folding everything out of the way. Turning and then getting this last little bit here. So this one's going to be the tricky side because it is pretty close to what we had stitched previously. So go ahead and pull that down. Make sure that you keep everything lined up. It's getting a little stuck because of the tape that I had on previously. I'm going to go ahead and tug a little bit. Oh, it's also the zipper head, so give me 1 second. I'm going to move the zipper out of the way. I have the foot, and that should help. Let's keep going. Tape is making it just a little sticky. All right, back it up. Close it. And we have our rear zipper pocket. Now we're on the last steps. We are going to be on this last zipper. Adding on the last zipper head, putting on the zipper ends, and then final construction. So we are just about there, guys. Let me go ahead and get some tape on the back of these and we'll get started. Okay, so we are going to be putting the end caps on like we did previously. On a zipper. Hold on 1 second, I need to cut this one down just a little bit. There's some tape showing right there. We're going to be sewing them down and then adding our final pieces onto this. So once we get there, we're going to put our foot down and double check our length. Always make sure you're watching your fingers around your needles. No one needs to get stabbed. This off. Turn it, and let's go down the other way. We have our zipper done. Now, here's the fun part. We're going to go ahead and take the inside. And here's what you need to do is, again, match it up so that you can find, let me move this over just a wee bit. Find the center. I'm going to go ahead and put a clip there like I did before. And I'm going to go ahead and use this top edge, make a snip to find that center point up here. I'll lay it down. Again, as we did previously with the inside. Now this zipper obviously is shorter. It's meant to be because it has the zipper ends. So that's just allowing it to have the little corners, and the zipper will stand out a little bit. We are going to be double checking the direction that we want the zipper to go. So on this piece, I want the zipper to go to open up to the same, close the same direction that this one does. So if I put it this way, that's not going to happen. So we're going to be attaching the back side first to this. Again, right from the middle. And then clip this on. We're going to go ahead and stitch across. Go ahead and change my foot spot. A little thicker, so I'm going a little bit slower there. Just make sure as you stitch, everything stays lined up. We're coming up to the zipper, so we're going to go ahead and, again, lift the foot, push the zip in the other direction. Continue across. Yep. And do the same thing as before. Flip this open, press it down to top stitch. Now, because this is vinyl, it can be a bit slippery and it can be a bit difficult to work with. So just make sure that you're being aware of how it's moving under the foot, because it could over perforate as you're sewing. If it's not moving steadily enough. I'm gonna move this past my foot here, because I know it's gonna get in my way. Now on to the second half. Going to use what we already have to line up the other side. I have our red here. Just make sure that you have everything in line. Flip it as needed. Boop, boop, and boop. Now, this will be zipping open and closing to the left, which is what I wanted. So we're going to go ahead and clip this in place. And again, we're going to be sewing across. I'm moving my foot to accommodate the zipper. My zipper is pretty close here, so I'm going to be going just a little bit farther, lifting that foot and moving that zipper head again out of the way. Put my foot back down. Again, my zipper is right here next to my foot. Reset up to do our top stitching. I'm going to change the thread because I don't want this to show up in red on there. So give me 1 second to get this thread changed. Alright, so I've got my blue thread back on, ready to top stitch. Let's get going. And just make sure that you're pulling on that seam to make sure everything is lying flat and there are no weird folds. Everything is in the direction you need it to be. I'm going to go ahead and just lift my foot now so I can get that out of the way. So across. Alright, we have our zipper on. Last steps, we're in the final bits here, guys. We are going to be folding these up and sewing starting from here. Starting from here, working our way up and around, and then back down to there. That way we still have a space to turn the bag through. So before we do this, we want to make sure that we have our zipper mostly open. We don't want it to get caught in the seams or break a needle on it. That would not be good. We're going to go ahead and clip together everything. Make sure that the spots that need to line up, like right up here by the zipper, are aligned properly. You can use as few or as many as you would like here, clips. I'm going to go ahead and just clip the vinyl sections together because that's the part that I'm going to struggle with. We're going to go ahead and go to our joining point. Now this is an interesting little thing that I picked up from another site. If you go out and start down here at the bottom, what you're going to be doing is creating an easier fold. So you're going to go one, up however many stitches that you need for your seam allowance. You're going to then turn, and you can continue across where you need to. That way, once you fold it at the end to close the pocket up, it'll automatically fold where you've had that sewn. A little small, so I'm going to go ahead and back it up. One stitch. And we're going to... It's a little wide on this side, so I'm going to actually follow more of the shorter curve as we go, just so that I don't accidentally miss it. So there's a little crooked on the cut edge, and that's pretty much my fault. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that those are still lined up. We're coming up to where the zipper is. You want to slow down, make sure that you don't accidentally sew over anything. I'm going to go ahead and back out here a little bit to where we need to sew. And just continue around. As we get down here at the bottom, it's going to get real thick, and right here again is that zipper. So if you need to shorten it a little bit as you're going through, do what you need to do. I'm coming up to it. What I'm going to go ahead and do is just shorten this a little bit. Drive over real slow. As you can see, my foot doesn't want to ride over that zipper so well. So I'm going to lift it up a little bit, and I should be able to continue without any issues. As it gets thicker, you just want to be aware so that you know if your sewing machine can handle it or not. Hand crank as needed. We reach the tricky bits. Be aware of where the zipper end is so that we aren't sewing over it. And drive over it real slow, because that is a big difference in stitch length there. So let's continue on past it. Coming up to the second zipper. Now the weight of the bag is kind of pulling this down just a little bit, so I'm going to try to flap it over here on the side a little bit. Make it a little easier for me. Turn. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to lift my foot. And cut the thread. Now comes the fun magic part. What I am going to do is trim away some of the areas where it's thicker, just so that it sits nicer when we turn it. Get to here, cut that off. Cut off some of this here. Off. Just trim it up a little bit. So let's go ahead and throw this stuff away. And reach into our hole here. We are going to grab a corner, force it through, and or a hand like a puppet, and pull. And once we have it turned completely into the lining, we are pretty much home free. And voila. We got our Thor bag turned. Now you want to make sure that over here where the zippers are, that we're turning out where those zippers are to get those corners, and then poking into the corners at the base to make sure they have nice sharp corners. I have a little bit of stitching coming apart right here, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is just turn it back through real quick and fix that. That's right where that zipper was that was having a bit of a time, so I'm going to actually move my foot over to make it easier to reach that point. And it's this section right here that's a little loose. See if you can see that. We're going to go ahead and go back over that real quick. So what I'm doing is just putting in a new line on top. I changed my foot placement to make it easier to get past this point. Open this. It's all nice and secure. Grab the corner, pull it back through. This is turned inside out just a little bit. It goes this way. Always fun day, birth in a bag. Reach back in so I can fix that corner from the inside. Nice and pointy as we can. Alright. Make sure again that we have our corners up by our zippers popped out nicely. Now, final step. We're going to close up the gap. Go ahead and close this up. I know the thread is blue and it's on red, but it's at the very, very bottom of the bag. I don't think anyone's really going to see it. So, should not be too much of an issue. I'm going to go ahead and close up that gap. Cutting our loose threads so they're out of the way. Tuck this in. Last little corner. And there you have it. We have the Seductress in honor of Thor Love Thunder. Looks like our God of Thunder's armor. Now pattern will be, the link to get the pattern, if you like this pattern, is going to be listed in the description, as well as a link to my Etsy site, so any bags that I have available will be there. If you're interested, and I can make custom creations, so just let me know.